Jack, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us. Of course, joining us from the Gitex conference in Dubai. First of all, I know it's still early morning, but you've been on the ground for a couple of days now. What's the energy like this year, and how does the conversation around AI here compare to what you're hearing in the US and Europe right now?
Well, Dan, very good to see you. We're live here from the floor of Gitex in Dubai. More than 200,000 people will be visiting this week, this conference. So a lot of good energy the last 2 days, but also concern. As you just mentioned in your opening notes, AI is transforming lots of industries, but also creating a bigger attack surface for cyber hackers. And so while AI does help in many areas, it also exposes vulnerabilities in the companies using it. As you mentioned in our SandboxAQ survey, wide adoption of AI, more than 80% of large enterprises now have adopted it, but it's also the #1 concern of more than 75% of CISOs and security leaders, the concern about how do they secure the use of AI and also defend against AI attacks. So this is a big concern. We're actually sitting in a part of Gitex now with many of the cyber companies around, and it's definitely on people's minds as they look to the future.
Absolutely. It's one of the big themes at Gitex this year. AI and cybersecurity, of course, very closely correlated. Let me take you back to something you just said. Jack, you said AI creates a much bigger attack surface for companies. Explain to me what that means in layman terms, and can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. So in the days before AI, we knew about an attack called SQL injection. And what that means is if you're accessing a database in a big company, and maybe you have access to it from a website so that you can look up information, you can inject hacking information into the database by putting something in that search box. Well, now fast forward to the prompt box that we're all familiar with the large language models, and we now have a new attack called a prompt injection. And so an attacker can use that prompt box that we're all familiar with and put nefarious malware through that prompt box into the large language model. That's one kind of attack. A second kind of attack exposes the information of the company to others. And so if you don't have the right guardrails around the use of AI in your company, if you're using an AI that, say, is using that data for training for everyone else to use, that means your proprietary info, your trade secrets in your company will now be accessible by the entire world. That was a real-world case, Dan, in the case of Samsung, where early on, when we say early, we mean a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Samsung engineers put some information in as a prompt, but it revealed some proprietary information from the company. And so security leaders across the Global 1000 are really concerned about these kinds of attacks. AI, very helpful tool, but exposing new vulnerabilities in large companies.
Right, so what can the C-suite do? What can executives within the technology and AI space actually do to ensure that large firms, big companies are protected from some of these vulnerabilities?
Well, the thing to do is, one, to make sure that if you're using one of the paid-for models, be it OpenAI or Google Gemini or Anthropic, that you make sure you have the enterprise edition that cordons off your information away from the training data set. Number two, another way to go, for example, Bank of America and others decided to use an open source version of large language models, download it locally, and run it locally in their own data centers to ensure that they had a good firewall around that. So there's different approaches, but the key is that only 6% of large enterprises even have a plan, Dan, as to how they're going to protect themselves from these new vulnerabilities. What we're also seeing, Dan, at Gitex is an increased focus on NVIDIA, on other chip manufacturers, and how they're transforming what will be the next wave of AI.
Indeed. So look, let's take a step back and also talk about what we're seeing in the Middle East right now as well, because Jack, I know you follow this really closely, as I do as well. Over the last couple of years, we've seen this region attract some really serious investment into the AI infrastructure layer in particular, with the likes of NVIDIA, as you mentioned, AMD as well, all backed by sovereign capital too. So what's your pulse check on the region right now? How do you see this region reshaping global compute capacity? And are you seeing anything that's giving you perhaps pause for thought or maybe even concern?
Well, I think that let's first look at the physical infrastructure. You're seeing a huge amount, billions of dollars being invested by G42 here in the UAE, by Humane, which is a new AI organization in Saudi. We're seeing these organizations put billions of dollars into the infrastructure. So that's happening at a really good pace. What I think is an opportunity, a big one here in the Gulf region specifically, is on the data layer. When you look at large language models, of course, the data is the World Wide Web. Recently, Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the web, came out with his book, This is for Everyone, and we use that for large language models as the training set. But there's a key opportunity that I think is before us here in the Middle East, here in the Gulf region, and that is to focus on applications in creating new biotech assets, new chemistry, new materials, new kinds of batteries. This region is very intense in terms of its energy usage and energy production. And they need a new kind of AI that is not just large language models, but now what you see being adopted in the Gulf is large quantitative models to take hydrocarbons, for example, make new kinds of products from it. When we look at biotech, we look at 400 million people in this region, key health challenges. And so using AI to develop new therapeutics, new diagnostics, that means we've got to go beyond the World Wide Web, and we've got to create new data sets that really address those kinds of issues. Going from a resource-intense economy to an IP-focused economy is one of the key things that you see the governments here focused on.